The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Cruiser Max Vibrance, High Stick NT, and the Manitoba Pulse Growers.
I'm Lindsay Smith with RealAgriculture.com. I'm joined today by Dieter Schwartz, Market Development Agronomist with Pride Seeds. We're in some soybeans and some variable soybeans. What are we looking at? What are we talking about, Dieter?
Well, this is probably a typical field on the prairies this year. As most people will know, we've had some really interesting weather this spring, and we've had an abundance of rain in some areas. This is actually a fairly well drained sandy field that is looking really nice compared to many other fields that are really suffering. But this field is actually a good snapshot of what the province looks like. We have some nice looking green beans, we have some yellow areas behind us, and we actually have some water standing in this field as well. So unfortunately that's the nature of our spring this year, but we have had some calls of growers that are concerned about yellowing in their field. So I wanted to touch briefly on what some of the reasons of that may be, and if there is anything we can do about it, and how we determine what our next course of action should be. So one of the things I do want to say before we get digging is that anything I do say is not necessarily a cure-all. It's not necessarily a blanket recommendation for the entire prairie provinces. Please check with your local agronomist to make sure you get a recommendation for your field, for your individual field. Once again, with all the variability that we're seeing, every field's going to be different. So make sure you consult your local experts in your fields. So let's dig up some plants. So I'm digging in an area that is what I consider to be kind of a higher spot in the field, and so we're probably at the third trifoliate here. Probably on average in this area of the province, this would be about an average stage. While I don't have the exact date that this was planted, this was likely planted somewhere around the third week in May. And we are seeing in this area of the field, we are seeing, and I'm not sure if the camera can pick that up, but we are seeing some nice nodulation on these beans. And if we slice these open with our MacGyver Swiss Army knife, and by the way, many people don't know who MacGyver was anymore, and I think that's a real shame.
That really is a shame.
And
I know, Dieter, so it's okay.
And I think that should be taught in schools, actually. But
yeah, it really should. I agree.
But what we're looking for with the nodulation here is if we're slicing these nodules open, and once again, I think we have some still pictures, but we're trying to look for a nice pink or reddish color in the nodule that indicates that the rhizobium bacteria is actually active and working and capturing that nitrogen, and that the plant then is utilizing that nitrogen. And that is why we're seeing, and this may not be the best example, this plant's a little tattered, a fairly decent green colored soybean plant. Now this one certainly I wouldn't call this one yellow, so it's doing quite well. Has quite a few nodules on it, and seems to be doing well.
So and that's something maybe, so we did some digging to get some representation of this field, and we certainly were looking, this side of the field is probably almost one full leaf stage ahead, or pretty close. And walk us through what we found in the poorer area where the beans definitely look yellow, certainly some water stress. What did we find there?
Well, in the poorer areas of the field, certainly we saw some, and you can maybe see that behind me, we saw some yellow plants, and when we started digging there, we didn't actually find any nodules at all. So that may be a case of either a compaction issue in that area, or it looked as though there may have been some standing water in that area, and once again, plants need oxygen to live, but roots also need oxygen, and sometimes it's easy for us to forget that it's below ground. But more importantly, on the soybeans, these little rhizobium bacteria, these little nodules, also need oxygen. So when we're in an area that's compacted or has a lot of water, they just cannot work. The other thing that I've seen this year, not in this field but in other fields, is that some of our earlier planted fields that got planted in the wet soils, the nodulation is quite poor on those. And even fields that were planted 2 weeks later in warmer soils have, are looking much better and have a lot more nodules on them. And that may just be a case of not waiting for things to be fit. And I completely understand that this year, with our very, very tight planting window, farmers just did not have an option. Now, it's my expectation that those fields will come out of that just fine, but it will take some time. And
what about for those, now this is a pretty localized area in the field where we're not seeing any nodulation, and the plants are quite yellow. Is there anything we can do to rescue those plants?
Well, that's an interesting question. So in some cases, it's just a matter of the nodulation to catch up, the plant to be able to capture some of that nitrogen that's in the soil. In other cases, we're seeing this year, because of the spring we had, very slow mineralization of plant residue in the soil. So in soybean fields where we did not put a lot of supplemental nitrogen on at planting, it's just going to take a while for that nitrogen to become available to the plant. So this may be another one of those cases where, wait 2 weeks and go fishing, or leave your field alone and see what happens. There has been some research that's being done on adding additional nitrogen to soybean fields. Once again, the folks that manufacture the polymer-coated ureas, the urease inhibitors, are doing some research on adding supplemental nitrogen to soybean fields. It's felt that with relying on nodules to supply the nitrogen, we're maybe capping our yield at around 45 or 50 bushels. And if we want to get above that, we may need to add additional nitrogen. Now, once again, this is in the very preliminary stages, and it's in an experimental stage right now, and we need to do a lot of field work to prove that actually is happening. For this year, in beans, I don't think there's much we can do other than wait, and unfortunately it's just the kind of year we've had. But as you can see, the beans do come out of it, and they will green up, and hopefully if we get some more sunny days and warm days like today, our beans will turn around and will green up, and we'll look back at this in September, October, and probably have forgotten all about it by then. So yes, so we're hoping that we're going to get some favorable weather, and that the beans will turn around. But I just wanted to show you a little bit what some of the reasons may be that we're seeing some of these issues. If you have any concerns in your field, by all means feel free to give me a call or contact your local agronomist or agrologist that you may be working with. They will have some local knowledge as to what's happening in your area and in your field.
Thanks, Dieter.
Thank you.